Secure teleconferencing or video conferencing or web conferencing or whatever you want to call it. Obviously, this has come to the forefront here recently because so many people are now being forced to work from home, and all the various tools that are out there give you a really awesome way to stay in touch with your team, collaborate with customers, partners, etc. So the good news is there's a lot of great options out there. The bad news is there's been a lot of really bad publicity around Zoom. So I kind of wanted to start out with Zoom and talk a little bit about some of the issues that have arisen with Zoom. And some of these things are not necessarily exclusive to Zoom. You would potentially be subjected to these in any of these platforms if you don't really understand how they work. And that's one of the first things I think people need to keep in mind is whether you're using Zoom or you're using WebEx or you're using Teams or any number of the plethora of other possible options that are out there, you really need to invest a few minutes in the help that they provide, their blogs, that sort of thing, where they give you some guidance and training on how to use them correctly and securely so that you can stave off some of the issues that inevitably arise from these things. Now, again, Zoom has had their share of problems. It's a long laundry list of problems. It's a list of problems that starts back long before this whole quarantine thing hit, and they suddenly became very popular. Zoom's been around for a while, have a free offering, they have a paid tier as well. And I think one of the reasons why Zoom got so popular so quickly is because it is pretty easy to use. It's free, and most people are able to just plug it in and go. And I think that's where a lot of the problems arose. While there are some significant, what I would say, or were, they fixed some of those, and I'll get to that in a minute. There were some pretty significant privacy and security related issues, as well as what I would describe personally as some dubious practices. It was really easy for most people to just fire it up and start using it. So, it exploded almost overnight. I think probably until maybe a month ago, most people hadn't heard of Zoom. It was originally designed for the enterprise space, kind of like WebEx and Teams and some of the other bigger players out there. But again, it got really popular. And then all of a sudden it became the internet dumpster fire du jour. Every day it seemed like there was some bad news coming out about Teams. They said they used end-to-end encryption, and then we found out they didn't use end-to-end encryption. They had issues where you might expose your credentials if you were using a Windows client. You had issues where if you were using a Mac client, your web camera and your microphone might be turned on without your knowledge. There have been issues where videos have been recorded and then dumped in the internet where they can be found by anyone, including sensitive things like conversations with doctors and attorneys and that sort of thing. It's one of the things I want to wrap back around to towards the end of this and talk about. No matter what platform you're on, and you really need to understand how it works and think about the sensitivity of the conversations you're having and if they make sense for that particular platform, because they're not all equal in terms of privacy and security. So to Zoom's credit, they have taken most of these things to heart as they've come up. They've reworked their privacy policy after Consumer Reports found that the privacy policy essentially gave them sort of carte blanche to do whatever they want with your information. And as these issues have come up, they've done a pretty good job of addressing them. Their CEO came out recently and put a halt to all new development. They're going to focus exclusively on, for the next 90 days, simply trying to address the problems that have come up. When it turned out that they were sending information to Facebook from the Apple iOS client, they addressed it. And I guess one of my issues with all these things is they have done a good job of addressing these things, but they haven't done a very good job, in my opinion, of not doing them in the first place. So it's, again, kind of a dubious practices thing. They're doing these things. Then when they get caught, they say, oh, okay, we'll stop doing that. But they've stopped new development on the platform to fix a lot of these issues. They've already knocked out a lot of these issues. So, I don't think I would tell people there's under no circumstances would I ever use Zoom. We're using Zoom right now, as a matter of fact. I think you need to understand what privacy concerns have been raised and then decide, does it make sense for any particular conversation you want to participate in to use Zoom or perhaps something else? Another one of the big knocks on Zoom has been Zoom bombing. Even the FBI has come out and warned about this. There are sites that have popped up on the internet specifically designed to make it easy for someone to Zoom bomb. The whole problem with Zoom bombing revolves around the Zoom meeting IDs and the fact that they're a 9 to 11 digit number. And it's pretty easy to programmatically generate a 9 to 11 digit number and guess a bunch of them and get into the meetings. And again, this wraps back around to with Zoom, if you understand how the platform works, there are a number of different things you can do to lock it down and make it much more difficult for someone to Zoom bomb you or do many of the other things the folks have been doing that are causing problems. For example, you can, rather than use your own personal meeting ID, set it up so that it generates a new meeting ID each time. That way, if your meeting ID does get exposed, the next time around it will be much harder for someone to find that meeting ID because it'll be a new meeting ID. Set up waiting rooms. Now, this is, again, to Zoom's credit, they've recently changed it so now that by default, meetings get set up with a waiting room. So instead of someone being able to just pop right into the meeting, which is one of the big issues with the Zoom bombing and all the crazy things that have happened as a result of Zoom bombing, you now have to go into a waiting room and be permitted in by the host. I think that's a definite move in the right direction, and that's the kind of thing I think you need to look at no matter what platform you're on. How do you dictate who has access to those meetings? If you're going to publish a link to a meeting, then theoretically anyone could find that. They could join that meeting. If you set up a password, they got to have the password. Obviously, you can share that as a separate side channel conversation so that it's not public, that someone won't be able to just join the meeting. If you have a waiting room set up, then all the attendees essentially get funneled to that waiting room, and the host can then decide whether they want to let them in or not. And again, kind of understanding how the platform works. Once someone's in a meeting, if you want to remove them from the meeting, understanding how to do that, understanding how to mute their audio, understanding how to kick them out in such a way that they can't get back into the meeting. Exactly how that works from one platform to another will vary. All of these vendors have a plethora of documentation out there that will help you understand how to operate it so that you can, whether it's Zoom or some other platform, have private, secure conversations. The last big knock on Zoom at this point has been the lack of end-to-end encryption. They originally said that they had end-to-end encryption. Then it was pointed out that it really was not end-to-end encryption. I think they're going to work on that now. For something like this, where we know this video is ultimately going to be published, do I care about end-to-end encryption? Not really. This is going to be designed for public use. If, on the other hand, you were my attorney and we were talking about trade secrets or a lawsuit I was involved in, or you were my doctor and we were having some kind of private conversation about my health, I would be much more interested in end-to-end encryption. I think it would be much more important at that point. So I think, again, you have to decide based on the sensitivity, the need for confidentiality of whatever it is you're going to discuss in a video conference. Does that platform that you're going to consider using support end-to-end encryption? There are many that do. If you know you're only going to be talking to people who have Apple devices, FaceTime is a great option. It comes with Apple devices. It's free. It supports end-to-end encryption, and it works really well. A lot of people love FaceTime, and for relatively small groups, again, if everybody has a homogeneous Apple environment, it's great. It's a great option. Signal is another app out there. A lot of people are familiar with it. It's known for being extremely secure, end-to-end encryption. That's a good choice. WebEx. WebEx is kind of the granddaddy of all of these web conferencing platforms or video conferencing platforms. Originally designed for the enterprise arena. I've used WebEx for years. It's been around since the 90s. Cisco bought it in 2007. I think most people in the industry certainly understand who Cisco is. They trust Cisco. Cisco is not in the business of selling you information. They're a products company. So WebEx, I have found, works really well, especially if you have large groups of people. WebEx does support end-to-end encryption. And because it's been around for a long time, it has a lot of cool features. For example, out of the box, once you're a paying tier subscriber of WebEx, you can flip a few switches and broadcast to Facebook. So if you have a Facebook page and you want it to literally broadcast to the Facebook Live feature, you can do that. You can interface WebEx with other platforms like YouTube. So there are a lot of options at WebEx. Again, one of the key drivers in my mind is end-to-end encryption. If you need a really industrial strength, robust, secure platform, I think WebEx is probably one of the best choices out there. There is a free version of WebEx at this point through the pandemic, so you can get started with that, see if that meets your needs, and it's relatively inexpensive, even at that lower tier. If you want to use the features like the Facebook Live, that's a paid for feature. You got to be in the paid subscribers, but it's fairly inexpensive. I think I mentioned Microsoft Teams before. I'm a huge Teams fan. At Intrust, we use Teams internally. We have many clients that use Teams. We recommend Teams to our clients. I've used Teams in a variety of settings. Huge fan of Teams. In addition to the video conferencing capability, it's got chat capability. You can share files. You can do a lot of things. Depending on what licensing you have with Office 365, it's more or less baked into most of the licenses. And Microsoft also during the pandemic has come out and made it free. So in the free tier, you don't get all the full capabilities of the paid for Teams, but it's pretty robust and it works really well. Most people are familiar with Skype. Skype's been around for a long, long time as well. I think Microsoft is slowly trying to switch people from Skype. They bought it many years ago to Teams. But there are, and a number of others out there, GoToMeeting, Join.me. So, if you have concerns about Zoom, and I think there are many legitimate concerns about Zoom, although a lot of them have been addressed, there are plenty of other good options. Again, for me personally, if I'm really interested in security plus all the robust features, I'm probably going to go with WebEx. If I'm primarily interested in just functionality and something that's already out there to a large extent, I love Teams. And Microsoft continues to add functionality to it regularly. That's one of the problems with all these platforms. What you know about it today may change by tomorrow because as more and more people are being forced to work from home and more people are stuck at home and want to see their friends, their family, their loved ones, etc., they are rapidly turning to these services. And the good news is it's never been easier to use them. But I just would remind folks, you should think long and hard about whatever it is you're going to be talking about. Could it be recorded? Could it show up somewhere you wouldn't want it to show up, either inadvertently or because someone on the other end has control over that recording? And think about the security and privacy of these things before you just download the latest and greatest app. I think that's sound advice during this entire pandemic. As people are quarantined and they're forced to work from home, a lot of folks will say, "Oh, you need a VPN, you needed this, you needed that. I need to web conference." And if you don't have a full-blown technology stack your employer gave you, it's pretty easy to just go out, find the first thing you see, download it, and give it a shot. And I would just remind folks to remember that if you're not paying with money, you're paying with data. You are the product, not the customer. And you should do some homework to vet those things, or you may end up in a scenario like we've seen with Zoom, where the product has a lot of problems and or it isn't what it claims to be. Good news is there are plenty of sites out there you can use, like zdnet.com, cnet.com, consumerreports.com, pcmag.com, to vet these things. They have editors and experts who test a whole wide range of software and make recommendations. So, they might have a recommendation for the 10 best VPN clients or the 10 best video conferencing software platforms, that sort of thing.
So to summarize the last few things, whether it's Zoom or any video conferencing or web conferencing platform, you really need to go in and read the online help documentation, need to understand the settings, because another thing that's come up in the last few days is now there are 0-day exploits being sold for Zoom online, and there are hundreds of thousands, apparently over 500,000 accounts that have been leaked because folks unfortunately continue to use really weak passwords. So through credential stuffing attacks, the bad guys have figured out that they can log into these Zoom accounts and they can ultimately break in. So read the help, understand all the features, whatever platform you're on, apply basic cybersecurity hygiene practices. Make sure that you have a strong, unique password for every platform you use. I know that's a pain. At Intrust, we like a product called LastPass. There are numerous good password managers out there, and that might be a good topic for another seminar. Again, at Intrust, we like LastPass. I use it personally. I recommend it to clients. It's a good tool. It makes it easy for you to create strong, unique passwords and manage those passwords so it's easy for you to log in without all that pain of trying to remember some really long, complex password. So make sure you have a strong, unique password, and then also turn on multi-factor authentication. Most of these platforms support it. Zoom has multi-factor authentication. Zoom does not have it for the client-based side, but if you're using the Zoom web portal, your administrator can turn that on. multi-factor authentication, also called two-step verification or two-factor authentication, will go a really, really long way to make it very difficult for the bad guys to break into your account. And that's true no matter what platform you're using, whether it's video conferencing, banking, insurance, whatever. Google and Microsoft have both come out and said you should enable multi-factor authentication everywhere you can. It'll block about 99% of all automated attacks. So turn that on for Zoom or whatever platform you're using. And I would strongly argue that if you're using any sort of platform that doesn't support multi-factor authentication, you probably should reconsider and find some similar platform that does support it. And then really to kind of wrap up, Zoom updates their software. Again, as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, Zoom has done a fairly good job of trying to take all of the various security and privacy issues that they've been hit with and tackle them fairly quickly. So there are updates to the Zoom client pretty regularly. You can log in, open up the Zoom client on your device, log in. There's an option there to check for updates. You should be trying to update that software as often as you can. And that's true for any software you're using. One of the easiest way for the bad guys to hit you is through 0-day vulnerabilities that are out there, whether it's Zoom or Microsoft Windows or Microsoft Office or some other software. You need to be installing those updates. So make sure whether it's Zoom or WebEx or whatever video conferencing software you're using, you're installing the updates regularly. My advice would be, especially while you're quarantined at home during this pandemic where your IT folks may or may not be able to apply those updates for you, you should check for updates regularly and apply them as frequently as you can, particularly with Zoom. And then finally, I sincerely appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk about this. I'm easy to find out there. You can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm happy to try to answer questions. You can find me at the intrust-it.com website. If you have questions about this or anything else related to cybersecurity, I'm happy to help. So again, thanks for the opportunity. Hope everyone stays safe and healthy out there, and hopefully have the opportunity to touch on some other cybersecurity topics soon. Thanks.